What you've just heard were the sounds of Pod. Pod is the name and star of an educational game released for the BBC Micro in 1984. The premise for Pod is this. Pod has a secret. When you find out, don't tell anyone. Pod can do lots of things that you can do, but this adorable character can also perform many unusual actions. Pod actually knows 120 words, but isn't going to tell you what they are. You have to find them. So you are presented with Pod, a crudely drawn bright red blob with a face on a background an aggressive shade of green, and you type in sentences in an attempt to discover those 120 words that Pod knows. If you find one he does know, he performs a little animation based on that word. Pod can run, Pod can walk, Pod can fly, and so on. Pod is one of my earliest memories of interacting with any kind of computer. Fortunately for me and for you, the BBC Micro is so old that it actually predates even me. When it's excavated from whatever tomb it had been lying in to be introduced to one of my childhood classrooms, it looked, even then, as if it had crawled out of the same primordial ooze as the horse and cart. Still, at the time, it was thrilling. Picture me and a Beano-esque crew of friends being set loose on Pod. Poor, grotesque, innocent Pod. We set Pod free from his static life, but not in a nice, benevolent way. We try to make Pod verb in ways that Pod should not verb. Pod cannot and Pod definitely shouldn't. But Pod can explode. And with us, he does. A lot. We don't find all 120 verbs. We barely find 12. But we felt like we were making this experience. Making this game. We weren't. But this was an introduction to the idea of game as plaything, as interactive play space, as a tool for creative thinking. Maybe this is a reach, but it feels like an early example of that. The first drop in an ocean that ripples out over the decades. So let's follow those ripples outwards and smash cut through the history of video game creative applications, taking in Mario Paint, Mario Artist, The SimCities, the theme parks, Dreams, Flipnote Studio, and Minecraft, ending dramatically in 2021 with the release of Game Builder Garage. Game Builder Garage is released on Nintendo Switch in June 2021, and it's a creative suite / educational tool / game. Game Builder Garage is a piece of software that teaches the player how to make games through a visual programming language. You are introduced to the concepts of programming and walked step by step through the process by the Nodon. The Nodon are humanoid representations of various elements of a game. The stick Nodon represents the Joy-Con joystick, the button Nodon represents the face buttons, and so on. You physically connect the objects to build your game, which increase in complexity as you play through the campaign. Game Builder Garage sits at 77 on Metacritic and recorded 1.15 million in sales. Another one of those examples of the huge install base of the Switch giving life to otherwise niche products. For me, it's a cute and effective introduction to game making for a certain type of player, with the usual caveats that apply to a lot of Nintendo's projects, in that it features some odd, frustrating omissions and limitations, and it's really, really chatty. However, within the remit that it establishes for itself, I think it's a pretty successful and admirable achievement. It manages a respectable compromise, in that it has something for total newcomers or developers with some experience. It's fun and playful, and it tries hard to bring difficult concepts to a wide audience. It also does one very cool thing. One of the big selling points of the whole game. It features the ability to make your own games and share them online. But this is Nintendo. That, of course, is just not that simple. You can create a game in GBG and generate a code unique to it. Other players of GBG can use that code to download and play your game. But there are no tools to assist with this. There is nothing to assist with the sharing or dissemination of this code, your work. There's no social network, no messaging or any kind of infrastructure built to facilitate a Game Builder Garage community. This was, and still is, seen as the big drawback for the game. The thing that held it back, that still hangs over any discussion of it, that prevents it from having a lasting legacy in the world of creative games. But that, of course, is just not that simple. It's 2025 now. Limitations are not limitations anymore. There is always someone out there who will do what Nintendo don't. And that's the subject of today's episode. Hi, I'm Andrew. Welcome to Dialogue Tree. This is episode 12. Meet VideoDojo, the team that built Game Builder Garage. VideoDojo is Dom. Dom started a YouTube channel in 2011 under the name VideoDojo, posting Let's Plays and eventually evolving into producing a cartoon called Deep Space Adventures. He had a break, returning to YouTube post-COVID by streaming WarioWare DIY. Then comes Game Builder Garage. On release, Dom starts streaming Game Builder Garage regularly, and quickly builds an audience, which turns into a following, which evolves into a community. He plays community creations on his channel, frequently streaming up to 30 games in a single sitting. He organises Game Builder Garage game jams, prompting collaboration, knowledge sharing, and a whole heap of games. The community that VideoDojo helps to build creates a game called Mousie's Cheese Maze that represents a landmark for this toolset. It's a top-down puzzle game that holds up to repeated plays, speedruns, and introduces a mascot that is seen in a number of subsequent GBG projects. The community that VideoDojo helps to build sets up a website called My Garage, later replaced by GBG Shop, which essentially functions as a browser-based eShop for Game Builder Garage. This is where you can list your Game Builder Garage game with a description, trailer, changelog, and most importantly, the code used to download it. There are wishlist features, search options, filters, everything you'd expect from a modern storefront, only for community creations from a game that many felt the publishers of had forgotten about. VideoDojo, and the community that is fostered from it, makes Game Builder Garage into what it should have been at launch. They give it a second life. They make it. Every June, VideoDojo celebrates the anniversary of Game Builder Garage with a game jam. This year, 2025, in honour of the 4th anniversary of the game and the VideoDojo GBG community, they held their biggest one yet. And, most excitingly, they produced the first Game Builder Garage Direct, showcasing a number of new, upcoming, and sometimes strikingly ambitious games built in GBG, all in an enjoyably good-natured recreation of the Direct format. While all this is going on, they are making another bold move. VideoDojo are making a game. Only not in GBG, but for retail release. A creative management sim called Townbox. This anniversary seems like the perfect time to ask the question, how do you do this? How do you foster and build a positive creative community out of the bones of a product limited in scope by its very design? How do you grow this into a continent-spanning enterprise that generates more than 100,000 games and eventually climbs out of that walled garden and into the quote-unquote real world? Really, there's only one person to ask. Dom, the founder of VideoDojo. Roll the tape. Dom, welcome to Dialogue Tree. Thanks for coming on today. How's your week been?
It's been good. Thank you for having me, first of all. We've just had a bit of a heat wave here, and it's finally broken, so it feels nice to not be sweating from the moment that I get up in the morning.
It is nice to not be sweating while sitting still.
Yeah.
That's something that no one should do. Yeah. So you are the first guest on Dialogue Tree, so thank you for that. We are talking today to mark the 4th anniversary of Game Builder Garage and to explore and celebrate the community that has sprung up around that and that's kind of given it a life that it might not have otherwise had. Now, I'm quite an inexperienced interviewer, but one thing I've picked up on from listening to countless other podcast interviews is that there is one customary icebreaker that I'm happy to steal here, and that is a pretty obvious one. What was your start in gaming? Like, do you have any sort of formative early memories that you'd be happy to share here?
Oh, that's a great question. I've racked my brain before about what my first game that I played was, and I've got to be honest, I don't think I have a specific memory of a first game that I played, but I do think my earliest memory is probably playing the original Metal Gear Solid on PlayStation 1.
Wow.
I have an older brother, and he's always been into video games. And once I think the PS2 came out, the PlayStation 1 kind of freed up as something that I could play, uh, unsupervised, so to speak. And I just have countless memories of playing in the first two stages or the first two areas of the first Metal Gear Solid game. I had no idea what I was doing. I couldn't progress through the game, but it was just so much fun to run around and kind of interact with it as a play space or like a toolbox. You know, the interactions in that game were very, very deep for something of its time. I think the story in that game and the cutscene and the art direction get a lot of praise, but particularly in those first few areas when I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but once you arrive into the kind of the dock at the very beginning, there's puddles, and as you splash through those puddles, it alerts guards. You leave footprints, making footprints in the snow as well, and triggering the different kind of alert stages. I didn't really understand why any of it was happening, but I understood that those interactions were interesting, and it wasn't till many years later that I actually properly played through that game. But I'd say even at those early stages, it was very compelling and very fun to play around in that space.
Yeah, that's like a great type of first memory that a lot of people have. You're just being set loose in a sandbox. You have no idea sort of what you're supposed to be doing. You have no concept that there is like a goal in mind. You're just happy to play around in this this environment that's completely unnatural to you.
Yeah, and I think that's probably my relationship with games for a long time as well. There were games that I have a lot of fondness for that I know that for the first few years of playing them, I didn't really understand what I was doing, and I didn't really understand what the larger objective was, and that the thing that I was being drawn to was either something about the characters or the world, but mostly the interactions that you had in that space.
Okay, that's very interesting. I was sort of half expecting your history to sort of start with some sort of tinkering thing. Do you have any sort of like pre Game Builder Garage history with like any sort of software creation tools or any like creative suites?
Yes. So I think with creative tools in games, well, I suppose it depends how far I want to go back, because I know that very early on we had a PC game that was some kind of educational game builder software. However, I don't have like a fun story of like, oh, this was my favorite thing ever. I truly just bounced off it. It was I don't even remember what the name of it was. I think it was really made for schools. And it was kind of like an introduction to coding or to programming. It was a kind of very rudimentary 3D thing. I've looked it up before because I was really curious to see what it was, because I'm kind of interested to go back to it. But I tried it. I couldn't wrap my head around it. It was too complicated for me. It was a concept that was just beyond my understanding at that point. So I don't have like a long history with making games. I think as well for a long time, I didn't really understand that games were made. They were just there. We had a chipped PlayStation 1, so we just had this binder full of games, and I would dip into these different games, and I had no concept of the fact that they were made by somebody, or
Right.
where they came from, or also whether a game was new or old. Because, like I say, I have an older brother. I would kind of just get systems or games that he was no longer interested in playing, and I was playing Metal Gear long after it came out, but it was the thing that I'd gravitated towards. It wasn't contemporary, and I certainly wasn't like excited for the newest game to come out. That's something that came much later. But in terms of creative stuff, I would really say that changed around the sort of DS era. I really fell in love with games that would let me play around with little toys, rather than like game building games. It was things like Electroplankton on the DS and like Animal Crossing on the DS, which, while not necessarily like a creative tool, being able to shape that island. And I remember spending hours and hours making clothes in Animal Crossing on the DS because it had the kind of pixel painting interface to make your own patterns. And making paths and things like that. They were all just simple, I think like 32 by 32 pixel squares. But obviously on the DS, that was so easy to draw and to paint because you had the touch screen. So it was the creative aspects of games that I was drawn to, rather than seeking out like tools to make a fully fledged game at that time. Certainly,
I think you can definitely see that influence in some things we're going to be talking about later. I have my copy of Electroplankton on the shelf behind me. I love that thing. That's one of the most wonderful things I think that Nintendo have ever produced.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, it's good. Yeah, good to hear another fellow Electroplankton head out there.
I think that was one of the first games that really opened my eyes to the idea that things could also. Actually, no, I'd like to correct myself. I don't mean opening my eyes to this. I think it was a reminder that games as toys were just as valuable as games that tried to be something more complex. I don't know exactly the correct way to phrase that, but
play is important. Play in itself is worthwhile.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yes. That can be the driving force behind a game. There doesn't need to be an evolving story. There doesn't need to be a grand narrative for it to be compelling and also, worth your time just to play.
So I thought we'd go on to talking about the VideoDojo YouTube channel, which you start, I believe, in 2011.
Yes. Yeah.
And I remember I was having a look the other day, and you I believe you did start with like Let's Plays of Animal Crossing.
Yeah.
Which is great. It's nice that you can see that little consistency. When you started the channel, did you have any sort of initial ambitions for it, like where you were going to take it?
No, it was really very much just a thing for myself and my friends. Animal Crossing on, I think it was City Folk, the Wii one, was one of the first things I tried out. And that was kind of just a test to see whether I could figure out how to record something and upload it. It was a real shock when the channel did eventually pick up a little bit. I'd been playing a game called StarMade, which is essentially Minecraft in space. And having so much fun. Again, not really playing that game how it was meant to be played, just kind of creating little stories in StarMade. And ultimately, the group sessions of playing that game with my friends turned into a group sort of role play storyline that we ended up turning into episodes of a little TV show that we called Deep Space Adventures. And this really blew up in a way that I wasn't expecting it to, and that ended up being the foundation of that channel.
This is sort of totally off off-piste from the subject of Game Builder Garage, but I wanted to highlight sort of this one particular video on your channel. It was about the Casio Loopy.
Yeah.
I thought this was fantastic. And I was absolutely fascinated by this. I have never heard of this console, and I'm big fan of failed 90s video consoles. I think that's a fascinating subject, but I'd never even seen this name like anywhere.
Wow.
Yeah, can you tell us a little bit about the Casio Loopy?
Absolutely.
It's such a fascinating thing.
Yeah, I can say this without a hint of irony. It is probably my favorite concept for a console ever. And if you've never heard about it before, it was produced by Casio in the 90s, the mid-90s. It was a little bit more powerful than a Super Nintendo. I'm using kind of broad definitions here. There is lots of technical quirks to it, but think kind of Super Nintendo, less powerful than a PlayStation 1, focused on 2D, big sprites, really colorful, and it was designed and marketed to young girls. It was designed to be a console that would appeal to young girls from the very beginning. And the big selling point of it is that it has a inbuilt color thermal printer for printing off your own stickers. And that's, to me, such a captivating kind of gimmick to include in a console, because you can be playing a game and you get to a memorable moment in the game and it prompts you to print off a sticker, and you have a physical, tangible memory of the game that you're playing. It's kind of like an achievement system come to life. It's not just a little pop-up on your screen. This is something you can stick in your sticker book, your diary, stick to a chest of drawers that your parents will tell you off for sticking it to. But actually the big thing is that out of the 11 games, there was only 10, technically 11 games that were released for the Loopy. The majority are creative suites. They are, painting tools. They are music making tools. There's a word processor. There's dress-up games, kind of those 2D, almost like paper doll style dress-up games. There's a manga maker, like a comic maker that you could print out a tiny little comic strip. You could print off and edit pictures from an external video source. So remixing images, making essentially kind of memes, image macros in the mid-90s, and sharing those with your friends. And one thing that I would like to say, I mean, I think commercially, compared to other systems, it is a failure. If you put it alongside something like the PlayStation, which came out, I think, a year later. But Casio, outside of their musical instruments and their stationery and electronic stationery that they made, they did make a lot of toys at that time, and I think they saw this far more as being a progression of the toys that they were making, which were kind of handheld electronics, creative toys, mostly for girls. I probably would think they don't see it as much of a failure as we do, coming from thinking of it as part of the lineage of video game consoles. I think it was probably successful in what they'd hoped as the scope for the game. I'm speculating. I don't know, but I've gone down a rabbit hole since I first learned about the Casio Loopy, and I would also be remiss not to shout out the incredible work that Rachel Simone Wiles has been doing at the Famicom Museum for the last decade to document and to get the word out about the Casio Loopy, because for a long time nobody had ever heard of it, and maybe if it did come up, it would almost come up as a joke. This idea of it being some silly thing where they thought they could make a console for girls, and that was in some way invalidating of it as a system. It's really, really special, and if you find any of what I've said regarding the Loopy interesting, I'd really recommend checking out Puppy Love Story, which was the first Loopy game to get a fan translation into English, and it was written by Terada, one of the writers of Final Fantasy in the early days. Kenji Terada?
Oh, wow.
Yeah. A big name for something that so few people have heard of.
Yeah, I think the Loopy it's fascinating. So it's such a wonderful idea, such a fun and playful idea. I'm really sad that it doesn't have more recognition. So yeah, I'll be linking to sort of all of this stuff in the show notes, especially your video, because I think that's great. And yeah, just encourage anyone to check it out. Yeah, is that sort of a type of video that you could see yourself doing more of, like more of this like historical stuff?
Yeah, that's probably the most fun category of video for me to make. The reason that I enjoy that so much is because it does force me to reflect on why I instinctively like the things that I'm so often drawn to in games. I think there is, there's a few of those that I consider the things that I'm most proud of on the channel. There's a video about a 3DS game called Freaky Forms, which it's a kind of game that I would have loved to play as a kid and had somehow passed me by entirely until the year that I made that video. I think it was maybe 2022. And I just couldn't believe that I'd never heard of it because it was almost like my dream game. And going into that and playing it many years after it released would have been like, oh, I wish I'd known about this before. But because I ended up making it the focus of that video and I wanted to really explore what its history was and where it came from and who made it, it then became like, wow, this is an incredible creation and something that I can enjoy in a different way to how I would have done it as a kid, but still really feel like I'm able to place a new enjoyment onto this through that framework. Similarly, there was a video that I did about Pick-Pack, which was a animatronic robot band that was made by Namco in the 80s. And I first learned about that through playing the Namco Museum games on stream, and I became really obsessed with them. And this was similarly something where it was like, I know as a kid, I would have really just poured over every detail I could about this. And nowadays, I'm able to dig into more of the details. I'm able to use things like Internet Archive to look where, what was written about Pick-Pack in the 80s in Namco's, periodical magazines that they released. I'm able to reach out to people who actually worked on it at that time. And that is such a fun process and such a rewarding process for me that, those videos don't get many views compared to the other stuff that I do, but that's a really, really rewarding process for me.
Oh, great. Yeah, I'd love to see more of that. What I'm taking from this is that you have a really wide range of knowledge of video game history and are able to articulate that really well. I'm very jealous, and that's not even the thing that we're focusing on. So that's really interesting. So we should probably talk about Game Builder Garage. So it's released in 2021. This is Nintendo's game creation sort of education suite, and it's one of many in that Nintendo have sort of a long line of these creative suite applications going from like Mario Paint, Mario Artist, and then some of the DS stuff that you've spoken about. Do you remember the announcement of it? And were you sort of like day one? Like, what were your initial reactions when you did pick the game up?
Yeah, so I think it's worth mentioning that I'd taken a long, long break from YouTube until 2021. And I got back into YouTube doing live streams of WarioWare DIY, another one of Nintendo's creative suite games, making your own micro games in the WarioWare style. That was released on the DS, and that was something that I think the DS life cycle was coming to an end. I'd already moved on to other things. I actually bought WarioWare DIY when it came out and then barely played it. So it wasn't until 2021 when I was streaming it that I really got into it. And for over the span of about 30 days, I streamed WarioWare DIY every evening. It was right after COVID and the lockdowns had just lifted, but I was, work from home still. I had a lot of free time. And I just wanted to kind of get back into the rhythm of things on YouTube after years and years and years of not doing anything on there. And part of what prompted that was the trailer for Game Builder Garage. And they dropped it kind of unceremoniously. It wasn't part of a direct. It wasn't a big announcement. They just put the trailer out there. And it was coming, I think, a month after the initial reveal. It was such a contracted time frame for a Nintendo game.
Yeah.
And I was instantly sold. It was such a strange reveal, but it was a compelling a compelling concept. It was just more game making, bigger projects than you would be able to do in WarioWare DIY, obviously because of the micro game aspect of that. And I was hungry to know more. Like, there was a lot that they didn't cover. There was not a lot that they didn't talk about. And it didn't come out of nowhere because Labo had come out a few years prior, and it resembled the VR Garage toolkit there in many ways. That kind of node-based game making came out of what had been established in Labo VR.
I have a Labo creation on the shelf behind me as well. That's another great thing.
Labo is really, really special. And if I can very quickly take another detour.
Oh, please.
So inside Labo Vehicle Kit is a mode called Adventure Mode. And Adventure Mode has you driving around in a car, which can either be controlled by the Labo kit or using like the editing tools. You can set up just a standard control scheme through the controllers. Very Game Builder Garage like in the way that you can hook those up as well. You drive around and you have these sort of passive objectives in this big open world that has grasslands and deserts and city. And it sounds very Mario Kart World. And it's definitely worth checking out if you're a fan of the open world stuff in Mario Kart World, because I think there is a direct link there. And if you take it even further back, especially with that creative game, Nintendo game side of things, there is a direct lineage, I think, to Mario Artist Polygon Studio for N64 disk drive, which had you creating 3D objects, which could then be used in an open world vehicular game where there was very loose objectives and it was mostly about exploration. I would consider that probably one of my favorite games of all time, and it's only kind of a subsection of this game that really was predominantly about making 3D models, but it's so captivating to me, and I think you can draw a direct line between that mode in Polygon Studio to Labo Vehicle Kit Adventure Mode to Mario Kart World, and I don't even think that's too much of a stretch.
That's your next video.
Yeah.
I think that's the headline of this episode now. That's incredible. I had no idea that was in Labo. And as you were saying it, I was like, whoa, hang on, this is Mario Kart World. That's amazing. I've got to check that out now.
You should. It's really, really fun. So much is already realized there, I feel. They got it right the first time around.
Yeah, no notes. They didn't need to make this new game. They spent like 8 years making Mario Kart World when they perfected it first time out. And
yes.
So I think that our talk about like the GBG community sort of we'll probably cover your journey like with it. So before we jump to that, what I think would be interesting to hear is as someone who's been there since release, I think you've probably got quite a pretty unique perspective on Game Builder Garage. So I think it'd be interesting to hear, what do you think are the successes and the failures of it? Like, as an education tool and a creative suite, like, what does it do right? What does it do wrong?
Yeah, great question. And I think, sorry, I'm trying to think how to phrase this, because there are shortcomings in this in Game Builder Garage for sure. Many shortcomings. Some of them feel like they are intentional. They are by design. So, for example, while you can make 3D games, there is no inbuilt way to make a HUD in a traditional sense. You know, something that is like printed onto the camera if it was a first-person game. These solid, rigid elements that are made up of graphical pieces or text or numbers. Instead, you have to physically attach something to the camera. Almost like, putting a carrot on a stick, like floating out in front of you in physical space.
Right.
And that feels very much by design. It's the kind of physicalization of a lot of game elements that is intrinsic to the node-based design that they use. Every object in that game stems from a node, or they're called node on in Game Builder Garage. And outside of values being passed, there's not really anything that is like intangible in any way. Everything is physicalized. That feels like an intentional choice because I think it kind of helps communicate those concepts without overcomplicating them or abstracting them in the way that so much other game development software can. But then there are things that feel like really practical or, even just budget limitations. Like there is no proper way to share games within that. And I get the feeling that Nintendo just didn't want to have to deal with moderation. They didn't want to have to deal with filtering stuff there, getting rid of potentially copyright infringing material or, stuff that wasn't appropriate. So they go for kind of a continuation of like the friend code system on Wii, where it's like, unless you specifically get this code from somebody that you have to enter and you choose to download it, there's no way to just accidentally stumble across content. And those do feel like significant shortcomings, because I think there are lots of people who were really fascinated by Game Builder Garage on the launch week. They were like, wow, this is really cool. Nintendo are making game-making tools. And then the second that they realized that it wasn't going to be easy for them to sort through games, to find the newest games, the best games, they lost interest. And I think the desire to make games is a niche subsection of people who play games. Not everybody has the patience to make games or wants to spend time making games. But there are a lot of people who are curious about playing the games made by the community. And with that missing, that was, I think, the biggest failure of Game Builder Garage. But I don't know whether that was Nintendo's intent with it too. I think it's a bit unfair to necessarily call that a failure. And it is something that the community went on to fix themselves. And that's maybe something we can talk about later. But I think it is a very, very successful introduction to many game design mechanics and to the concept that I described earlier, that games don't come from nowhere. There are people that make games, and the tools to make games, especially nowadays, are surprisingly accessible. And I know that it has launched quote-unquote real game development journeys for many people who started out with Game Builder Garage. So for that reason, I think it is a success, despite any shortcomings it might have.
I completely agree. I think if it inspires or like enables like even one person to actually produce something, like you say, quote unquote, like a real game, I think that definitely qualifies it as a success. But yeah, the thing about sharing games, that's sort of like the main criticism of Game Builder Garage. And yeah, I think I agree that that's intentional. Nintendo had no sort of desire to create a social space that they would then have to maintain. That's like an overhead that they're not interested in pursuing. Do you think there's like anything that other tools like could learn from Game Builder Garage, like other tools, other software creation tools? Is there anything that they could learn from Game Builder Garage?
I mean, I think younger people today have so many ways to think about how games are made and to explore game creation. Scratch is something that I think is often taught in schools these days. Minecraft, Roblox, Fortnite, for issues there might be with those games, they are incredibly empowering for young gamers in making their own content, making their own games, expressing themselves through what they make, and acting as social hubs for people. I think if you're going to put the ability for your players to create something in your game, whether or not that's the primary intent of the game or whether it's just a component, I think finding that sweet spot of empowering them but not overwhelming them is probably a huge challenge, but also very essential for those tools to be used and adopted and appreciated by the most people possible. It doesn't matter how powerful a tool set you have if it's not going to be something that people can wrap their heads around. And I think there must be diminishing returns at some point in terms of complexity and power in something like that, because at some point someone would say, well, why don't I just use Unreal 5 for this, or why don't I just use Godot for this? I think like, yeah, Nintendo could have put far more complex features in Game Builder Garage, but it would have alienated a lot of people, and the people that it would have appealed to are using real game engines.
Okay. I just got one last question on this. And it's kind of a broad question to which I don't know if there is a definitive answer, because we have things like these platforms like Minecraft and Roblox. But do you think there is a space for a AAA driven, a AAA produced, community driven games creation suite to exist, sort of long term? Because I was thinking of Dreams and the closure of that. Was that sort of the last shot at a big version of this, or do you think that something like Game Builder Garage, like a more accessible thing, could provide a platform long term for people to become developers and provide a platform for people to share games?
I think this is something that Nintendo are definitely trying to work out this generation, because I think we shouldn't underestimate how massive Minecraft and Roblox are for younger players. Like, there are players who have grown up with Roblox and they play Roblox every week and they don't really buy other games. And they might just use Roblox to make experiences for them and their friends. And I think Nintendo understands the aspects of that are compelling. I think what Nintendo did in that closed Nintendo Switch Online playtest thing that they did at the end of the Switch's lifespan, that they've still not talked about publicly, was their first foray into that world, because it actually grabs a lot of aspect of what we see in like Minecraft servers, that kind of persistent world with creative elements. Some of what you see in Roblox around like the ability for user-generated content within that world and how it plays into the different aspects of it. But then also, I think little bits of the like very Nintendo approach to these, that kind of like mutating these concepts into something that more closely fits their values and their principles and how they understand video games. And to me, that's very compelling and very exciting. Whether or not it will be mass market or mass appeal once that eventually comes out, if it is a real game, if it becomes a real game, or whether it was just a network test, whatever it is, that's the closest that we've seen from Nintendo. And I think it's definitely going to be, if it was to come out, that would be their first attempt at that. But I think Minecraft and Roblox are doing that right now. Just because they're not talked about by the majority of the gaming press, they are huge. They are massive, and they are these persistent social spaces with creative elements, with creation tools that are being played by millions and millions of people.
Did you get into that playtest?
No, sadly not. No, I consumed as much content as I could that didn't get immediately deleted by Nintendo. But
don't admit
did you get a chance to play it?
I did. I got into the program.
Oh,
I was so confused. It was exactly what it looked like. Like you jump in and I won't go on too long about this, but you jump into it, and I was amazed that there was like this like really a fluid, snappy movement to it. Like the way you can like fling yourself around was really cool. But it was so busy. There was so much going on. There's you could see so many other people, and what you're actually doing was just a bit confusing to me. So I only had a couple of goes with it and thought this is fine for me. But it's so interesting that they did that, and it is fascinating to like think about what it might have actually been if we'll ever see it, or if we ever see what that was testing, whether it will be obvious that it was that.
Mm-hmm.
Like you say, it could just be a network test for something completely different, and whatever like comes out of that doesn't take that shape. of this sort of like this strange like building, this community building thing that it was. Yeah, I'm really interested to see where that goes if we ever find out.
I really hope we do find out, and I hope it is closer to that than just a network test, because what was there was very, very compelling from looking in from the outside. Yeah. And would be one of my most anticipated games from Nintendo that we know about, if it is a real game.
That need to make the developer, one of those make the developer interviews. I hope they do that for this thing. That'd be great. Yeah. Cool. Well, so we've covered your history and a bit about Game Builder Garage. That seems like a good opportunity to take a break. And when we come back, we'll talk about the VideoDojo community, GBG shop, and the future. So we will pause there, and we'll see you after the break. We are back from the break. Thanks, Dom, for joining me again. We're going to talk about the VideoDojo community now and how that all took shape. So I'm curious to hear your take on how the community did take shape. It seems quite vast, and I think it'd be interesting to get an idea of sort of the timeline of how it evolves, like with the game jams, your streams, the creation of GBG Shop, and where something like Mousie's Cheese Maze fits into all that. So I guess, first question, how did it start? Was there a conscious effort to bring people together, or did it just sort of happen organically?
Yeah, I think the first thing that I'd like to say is really the VideoDojo community is the Game Builder Garage community. I'm very lucky to be an aspect of that community, and there wouldn't really be a channel without Game Builder Garage. I think I was just in the right place at the right time when it comes to GBG. Like I said, I just started back up with streaming on my channel, and I had the flexibility to play GBG on stream the minute it came out on launch day. I was there at midnight streaming it. So for a game that didn't really get that much coverage, it just so happened that I was kind of the place where most people were able to watch GBG stuff. So I really do think of the community around my channel as being, other way around. My channel is one aspect of the community around GBG. Sure. And it really was an organic process. I was excited for GBG. I wanted to stream GBG. I wanted to make sure that there was a place where people's games could be seen as well and shared. So for the first I think at least the first month, I actually forget what exactly the timeline was, but I was streaming GBG every evening, like an unbroken streak for quite a long time. And I was just asking people to send in their games, and I would play like 30 games a stream, and it was really, really fun to see as people got to grips with the tools and how those games grew in scope and complexity and style and confidence. And alongside that, I was making my own games, but really those games were made, because they were all developed on stream, they were made collectively by the community. Like, I was learning new techniques from people. They were giving me directions on how to implement an idea I had. They were giving suggestions for characters or for collectibles. So Mouse's Cheese Maze, which was the game that I developed collaboratively with the GBG community over the span of a year or more on my streams, was this giant community effort. Like, I guess technically the dev team rivaled that of an actual AAA release in terms of how many people had an involvement, which is very funny to imagine for such a goofy little game that literally stemmed from my first time playing around with the creation tools in GBG on launch night. It was within the last, I think, half an hour of the stream. I thought, oh, let's try the free programming, and I drew this silly little mouse character, and then continued to work on that for a year and a half with the community until it eventually released. I think one of the biggest kind of moments for the current GBG community was when the fan-made website My Garage Games went offline. So right after launch, this website was set up as a way for people to share their games online. And after that being the central hub for so many GBG fans to share their work, I think a lot of people lost their motivation once that went offline to make GBG games, to play GBG, to participate in the community. And there was a bit of a little, I think, a kind of a dark age for GBG when that went offline. Obviously, I was still doing the streams at that time, and people had a smaller platform to share their creations, but that was really like a big blow. And it wasn't for, I think, I'm not exactly sure on the timings. I think it was maybe 2 years ago from now that GBG Shop set up, which was the spiritual successor to My Garage Games. And initially I was a little bit hesitant. I'll be completely honest. I was a bit scared because I kind of didn't want to get my hopes up that we'd have this new platform and be hurt again after My Garage Games went offline. But the team that created and continue to work on and continue to improve GBG Shop blew me away. They are amazing. They're so dedicated, and they clearly just love GBG and love what the community can do with it. And it is now like the definitive place for people to share their games. It has so many features. There's technically ways to do kind of asynchronous online multiplayer with GBG creations now because of the tech that was developed by the community and then implemented into GBG Shop. And this is where I think the community really stepped up to fix the flaws of GBG. So yeah, that sharing became something that people would do through GBG Shop. Also, things like the texture tools in the game, the ways to create textures are really rudimentary. They are very similar to making patterns in Animal Crossing using that pixel painting tool. In fact, they're actually slightly more basic than even that. But the community made ways to create textures on the computer and then using an Arduino automatically reproduce those in GBG's tools. So you can make very, very complex textures in Sprite or Photoshop or whatever you want to use, and then have the Arduino kind of paint those textures for you, allowing you to do stuff that would either take hours and hours and hours in GBG's texture creation tools, or would otherwise be pretty much impossible to do. So these shortcomings have very quickly been fixed by the community, and I think is a testament to what happens when you draw that many talented people together around something that's about making. Inevitably, they make ways to make making easier. They never cease to amaze me, and it feels so special to be able to be part of that. And that was one of the things I really wanted to do with the Game Builder Garage Direct as well, to present a space that could be a showcase for the amazing talent on display in Game Builder Garage, and hopefully draw attention to it from people who had never interacted with GBG before, or had played it for the first week and then fallen off because they maybe didn't personally get on with the creation tools and didn't have a way to find those games. So yeah, I feel very, very much like I was in the right place at the right time with regards to my channel being a element of the GBG community, and so lucky to be part of it.
I'm so glad you brought up the GBG Direct, so I don't need to do an awkward segue into it. I did just quickly on the GBG shop. I think that is such an important part of bringing life to Game Builder Garage. It unsilos all the games. It gets them out of sort of Nintendo's like bucket into a place where normal people can actually see it. That's what drew me in. I've just been browsing it and saw all this like these crazy things and all these like fun looking little experiments. And yeah, I think it's just such an important part in, like you say, fixing what was broken about it. Do you have any idea how many games are on GBG Shop now?
Yes, I think there's actually like a stat page for the number of games
really?
somewhere.
Oh, no.
So currently there are 1,236 games on GBG Shop, but there is also a back catalog of the, I think, 5,000 plus games that were uploaded to My Garage Games before it went offline. So thankfully the developer of that page kept an archive of all of the games that were on there. So cumulatively it's in around sort of 6,000. There is a member of the community who did some maths about how many games had been uploaded in totality, so not made available on these platforms necessarily. I need to very quickly check this number, but it's in the hundreds of thousands, definitely. But this is the thing. There is so many that have been uploaded but will never be seen outside of like maybe a friend sharing a code directly with something. There's no public way to view those games. 100,000 plus creations have been shared online, and that was that stat was found out by a member of the community through kind of reverse engineering the game code sharing algorithm, kind of how they generate the game codes. They were able to work backwards from that to figure out roughly how many games had been shared in the lifespan of Game Builder Garage.
These numbers, like, they really speak to the appetite that there is for tools like this. I think, Nintendo would be silly to not sort of exploit that in the future. That's remarkable. So like I say, I'm glad you brought up the GBG Direct. We should get on to talking about sort of the main reason why we're talking today. It's what prompted me to reach out to you in the first place, and that is the 4th anniversary of Game Builder Garage and your efforts to sort of mark and celebrate it. There's been the GBG June Game Jam. Had to really put some effort into saying that, and the GBG Direct. Would you like to tell us a little bit more about that? Like, how did the Game Jam come together? What came out of it?
Yeah, so every year I try and do something to mark the anniversary of GBG coming out. It was released on, I think, the 11th of June, 2021. So each year I try and do something. But for the 4th anniversary, I wanted to do a month-long celebration because I've actually taken a little bit of a hiatus from GBG while I was busy with other things. But I really wanted to put a spotlight on it this year. And in the past, I have hosted game jams. And those are something really, really popular in the community because they give this kind of centralized focus for their creativity. To have a little bit of a narrowing of the scope of the creations can sometimes be very fruitful for coming up with exciting ideas. So, for example, in the past, there was one game jam that we set up that only permitted you to use 64 node-on total. So that's those little those little blocks of code. So these kind of tiny games, these micro games. There was other ones in the past as well that were remix jams, where it was remixing games that already existed. So having to build a new game on top of a creation using elements from that. This time round, the jam wasn't actually set up or organized by me. So a member of the community, Coma Nomad, was working on a jam, and I wanted to make sure that had as big a platform as possible to be seen on. So Coma Nomad was hosting this June jam for Game Builder Garage, and with June also being Pride Month, they themed the jam around Pride. And more broadly, I think just like identity and love and self and friendship. And it was really amazing to see after 4 years of practice and new techniques being developed within the community, the scope of games and the depth of games that were produced for it. I very intentionally avoid ever saying that I have a favorite game in Game Builder Garage, because there's so many different kinds of games, and they're made by people who are all at different points of their game creation journey. There are people who are really making stuff for their first time, and there are people who have been professional game developers who work in GBG. So the breadth is broad. But there was a game called Poppy Petals that was made for that jam by a community member, Mercury Angel 23, and it's so beautiful. It's really, really a very much a realized artistic vision that just is gorgeous, and it's touching and it's sweet. And I think games like that alone are what make me glad that Game Builder Garage exists. And it's not just, oh, it's good for Game Builder Garage. It's a great thing that could be a standalone experience. And yeah, I'm so grateful that Komonomad hosted that jam this time around. It did free me up not having to run the jam, because they're surprisingly time intensive. It freed me up to do something that I'd wanted to do for quite some time, which was to create a direct for Game Builder Garage. So this was mimicking the directs produced by Nintendo, both in format and in presentation. And really my objective with the direct was to break outside of this community, because I think it's a very tight-knit community. Most people who play Game Builder Garage with any degree of kind of regularity are aware of the things that go on, the new games that are released within GBG. But outside of that, it goes undetected. So my objective was for this to be something that anyone could watch and be like, wow, I didn't know that GBG existed, or I didn't know people were making stuff this impressive in GBG. So yeah, created a direct. It had brand new game reveals. It also had a section hosted by a very big Japanese GBG creator and streamer. And I reached out to him. His name's Takti, because the work that he does on the Japanese side of GBG and showcasing those games is really, really impressive. And I think sometimes the language barrier can make those communities feel quite separated. And it's something that we've always tried to bring closer together through the years. So having Takti, who is very much like an experienced voice within the world of Japanese GBG creations, host a selection of games there as well was really special. And I feel very lucky that we were able to have his expertise on that section of the community.
Yeah, for what it's worth, I have watched the GBG Direct like 4 times now. That is more than I've ever watched a Nintendo Direct. I thought it was fantastic. It was such a great showcase for how far like the community created games have come. To anyone who has sort of cursory knowledge of Game Builder Garage, you could watch this and be pretty blown away by like how like sophisticated some of the stuff in there is. I could not believe there was Doom: The Garage Ages. That made me laugh so much. I thought that just looked fantastic. There's some other like really interesting stuff in there. There's a first-person stealth game, first-person horror game. These all look like really like faithful, sort of effective translations of these genres to Game Builder Garage, and I think that speaks to sort of the depth of this community, and especially with the Japanese creator you referenced there. Again, speaks to how big a community this is, and what a breadth of talent there is in it. Yeah, I thought it was really good. And anyone listening to this, I'd really urge to check it out. It feels to me like it has achieved the aim that you just that you stated you had, to sort of reach outside of this relatively small community and into like the wider sort of Nintendo world. So Yeah, good job. It was really good. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much.
I guess last thing on that, do you have any broader thoughts on how the content is on how creations have evolved over the last 4 years? Have you seen sort of a definite upswing in complexity?
Yeah, I think there's a really great metric for that change in complexity, which is when I first started, I would generally try and fit 25 to 30 games in a stream. And nowadays, I aim to fit about 15. And that's not because there's less games being made or submitted. That's because the games are typically more complex, more deep, have a longer playtime. It's not possible to fit 30 in a stream like I used to. And I think there's two tracks of development or progress in the complexity of the games. There's the technical side. There are like when the tools are as limited as they are in GBG, and when the physical constraints of the games are as severe as they are in GBG, you have to find so many workarounds to be more efficient, to shave, as we say, more node on from the game code so you can fit more in. And those technical developments in the processes people use is night and day from when the game came out. It is really amazing how complex the technical aspects are. But then I think on the other track, when it comes to the artistry, and I think the confidence of a lot of people who have been making games since launch, that's one of the things that astounds me the most 4 years in. You mentioned Doom the Garage Ages. Mr. Tiffles, the creator of that, had previously made Doom recreations in both Labo VR and Game Builder Garage when it launched. And starting the Direct with that game felt very appropriate because I think that was one of the few games around launch that broke out of the sphere of people that were interested in GBG. People saw that recreation and were like, "Oh, that's funny." You know, it was kind of the like Mario 1-1 on Dreams equivalent for GBG. And seeing what was possible 4 years later in GBG and comparing it and contrasting it to the original Doom Eternal recreation for Game Builder Garage was an appropriate way to start, I think. But I think for me, having been with the community for as long as I have, seeing the way that particular specific creators have either matured or felt more able to express themselves creatively over these 4 years is the thing that is the most exciting for me. Because I do occasionally go back to the older creations that are submitted by the community and seeing the ways in which their skill or their artistry has changed over time is really, really exciting.
That's great. I do have a potentially sort of existentially terrifying question here. So feel free to say no. But I think you've touched on this maybe on the channel or elsewhere. But at some point, it seems pretty likely that the servers for Game Builder Garage will be taken offline. How does that feel as someone who's involved in this project, knowing that this work could be lost? And do you have any plans for that?
It's really scary. And actually, the clock is continuously ticking because based on the way that Nintendo set up game sharing in GBG, any game that hasn't been downloaded within 365 days of when it was published is deleted. So this pruning is constantly happening. There are games that were created on launch day that are long, long gone. Like, the amount of lost media related to Game Builder Garage is huge and is kind of baked into the way that the sharing works. There are efforts to continuously refresh those games automatically. So there are members of the community who either manually go through and re-download games just shy of that 1 year timeout period to kind of refresh them and to buy them another year's time, or to automatically do it. So using an Arduino script to manually or automatically download games to stop them from running out of time and getting deleted. in terms of the more apocalyptic scenario of all the games being taken down, which will happen. There is going to be a time when that happens. I think I was reassured by the fact that Nintendo gave GBG a Switch 2 update. That's not going to happen imminently.
It's a stay of execution.
Yeah, exactly. But there have been efforts pretty much since the launch to find ways to archive this stuff following the shutdown. It's never been like one big concerted effort. It has been by different people at different times and has gotten to different stages. I feel pretty optimistic that it will be possible to find some way to A, preserve some of the games that are up there, but also B, perhaps even more importantly, allow for games to continue to be shared beyond the server shutdown. Yeah, I think this game has been thoroughly kind of torn apart by the community in many ways, and a lot of what happens behind the scenes, especially when it comes to how games are shared and downloaded, is understood, at least theoretically, and it would be more about putting those into place in a robust system to actually preserve and act as a community-made distribution system, similar to what we've seen with games like WarioWare DIY, which has a website that allows people to share their games, or with the sort of post-shutdown Wii and 3DS Pretendo network stuff. I hope that we will have something similar for GBG in place when that time comes.
Yeah, I think I share your sort of cautious optimism about it. I think a lot of people have been burned too many times by sort of, lost media due to companies taking these services offline, and the people sort of involved in the community seem like a pretty sort of tech savvy lot. So yeah, I think there is reason for optimism in that this stuff can be preserved. So yeah, that's something. I guess to wrap up this talk about the community, for anyone who's listening who is interested in getting involved in the community, where would you recommend they start?
If you are already playing Game Builder Garage and you are looking for a place to show those games off that you've created, I would say go to GBG Shop. That is the place to find and share games. It is a really wonderful effort. If you are looking to get advice on how to build something in GBG or get a better grasp of what's possible in GBG, there is a VideoDojo Discord as well, but there is also a dedicated Game Builder Garage Discord, which is it's a little bit quieter. Honestly, a lot of the conversation does happen on the VideoDojo Discord, but if you're looking for like just GBG chat, there is a GBG fan-made server as well on Discord.
Great. I'll link all that in the show notes, obviously. You said earlier that you don't say which games are your favourites, and I've literally got a question here that says, at the risk of having you play favourites, can you make some recommendations, blah, 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 blah. So I won't make you do that, but I'm guessing people can get recommendations for games on that Discord. Is that fair to say? Absolutely.
And I'd also say, cool, if you want to see really like the biggest, most ambitious projects being made in 2025 for GBG, the Direct is the first place to check out. There is also like a top 10 game list on the GBG website that's constantly changing. You know, there's a like system, a thumbs up system on GBG Shop, and that top 10 list is a good place to check out what is most popular in the community as well.
That's great. Yeah, the GBG Direct gave me that same sort of feeling that I get from Nintendo Directs, where I'm like, that looks cool, I want to play it now. It says, and then it says coming soon. I'm like, oh god, yeah. So it had the desired effect, and I will just recommend. I'll just recommend Mousie's Cheese Maze because that's a lot of fun. I think I think everyone should give that a go. So that's I think that kind of wraps up our talk on the community. I think we should probably take another quick break, and when we come back, we will talk about how VideoDojo has developed into development. More on that after the break. we are back from the break. Dom, welcome back. Thanks. So, VideoDojo and you are making a game for retail release. That's called Townbox. Would you like to tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, Townbox is a game that we are developing. When I say we, that's the team at VideoDojo Games. That was something that was established to make this game. Townbox is a creative town builder game and came from my love of... In fact, this is a little bit of a theme. My love, but fundamental lack of understanding in how city builders worked when I was a kid. And frustration with the fact that I had to think about how power management worked when I just wanted to make something that I thought was a cool city. So it's a town builder rather than a city builder because management of resources is not a concern. And the game is split into two parts. We have a build mode and a resident mode. The build mode is kind of more like your traditional city builder or your town builder game. And the resident mode is far more like a life sim. So you build a town, and then when you're ready, you go down to the town that you've created at street level, and you can run around and talk to the many quirky inhabitants that live there and complete quests for them. And the emphasis, more than progressing through a series of checkboxes, is really about centering player self-expression in what they are able to build and the flexibility and the creativity of the tools that we give them. I love games like Doshin the Giant and like Keita Takahashi's Nobby Nobby Boy, like those kind of games where the more traditional game objectives are slightly pushed back compared to the experiential elements of it. And I hope that Townbox will sit somewhere in that kind of realm once we're finished with it. It was really thanks to Game Builder Garage that I had the confidence to pursue something like this. And while the team is made up of a mixture of slightly more veteran developers who have worked in the industry and put out commercial games in the past, and younger, newer developers who, at least one of them, and I consider myself in this, have come from GBG as their primary experience in the world of games. And that's been a real learning curve. That's been a huge learning curve. What happens when you don't have a small number of node on that you can work with, and you can have this massive, seemingly endless scope to build a game? What do you prioritize, and where do you put that time and that resource? I really wanted to make a game that I wanted to play. That was kind of the thing that I saw, that there'd never quite been a game like that. And even the build and play, that two sides of a coin that are integral to Townbox, came from watching my niece and nephew play, where they would spend, an hour building a world out of blocks and out of train track and out of Lego and out of teddy bears. And once they felt like that world was complete, they would start playing, and they would start imagining these things. And what fun is it to make a space if you can't inhabit it? I remember playing SimCity and being like, I wish I could go down to the street level. I wish I could see or like Roller Coaster Tycoon, and being so drawn into the fact that I could follow a particular guest of the park and just desperately wanting to see what the inside of those rides looked like. And that's the feeling that we're trying to capture and also realize here in Townbox, which is being able to really inhabit the space that you've created.
Based on what you said right at the start of this about like playful tools, I think you can really tell that this is a game that you would like to play. I think you can tell from the trailer that the emphasis is on the creativity, and that there's I hope this is a fair assessment of it, that there isn't much friction to that you can create, you can customize this town. There's no sort of grinding for resources to allow that. Is that sort of a fair read on it?
Yeah, absolutely. That was a core tenet of the gameplay loop. We didn't want there to be resource gathering as an obstacle around creating what you wanted to see. If you want to make a town that is just nature, just trees, just a little tiny shack in the woods, um, it might make it difficult to progress, but you're not playing wrong. That's the thing. You're never going to be told by the game that you're playing it wrong by playing it the way that you want to. And that always was the friction point for me, I think, in a lot more of those structured games that had creative elements. Um, it should be a sandbox. It should be a selection of tools to play with how you want. And if you do want something that's more traditional in its structure, that's there in resident mode. You know, there is a progression. There are NPCs who have objectives for you to complete. But you're never going to be told by the game that you're doing it wrong if you don't engage with that in the same way.
Yeah, that looks really appealing to me personally, as someone who found like sort of resource collecting of something like Animal Crossing, especially New Horizons. Like it really slows down the progress and the actual fun stuff, like to a crawl. So yeah, I think Townbox looks really appealing on that basis. Has the how has like the VideoDojo community sort of influenced the project, like if at all? Are there any sort of like community sharing elements in the game?
Yeah, so I think the community more than anything gave me the confidence to try this. I think seeing that, you know, the little silly things that I made in GBG, or I very often do kind of creative streams on the channel, which is just me playing around with a sprite or paint, or you know, literally cutting and pasting pieces of cardboard, and getting that kind of feedback from people pretty real time, in a real time way, and seeing that people enjoyed that was a bit of a reminder, I think, that I love that creative process. I went to university and did a degree in art, and as soon as I finished, I went into a professional world, and a world where I didn't have anywhere near as much creative input on the things that I was involved in as I thought I would. And it was really through my interactions with the Game Builder Garage community, and I think just how lovely and welcoming everybody is in that community, that reminded me that I like making things. I love making things with other people collaboratively, and that I want to spend my time making things that I want to see in the world or in games.
Are you like the lead developer on this? And is this like the first like big project like this that you have led on? What's that been like for you, like transitioning to that?
Yeah, so I'm the lead on the project, and as anyone who has ever watched me make something in GBG, I'm not programmer brained. It's very, very difficult for me, sorry. And I really am so lucky to have such a multi-talented, skilled, experienced team in VideoDojo games, in the Townbox team, to help bring those things to life, and also to tell me like what is practical, what is possible. I've led on projects in the work that I did separate to YouTube and separate to this, but this is a scope that I've never worked to before, and it's challenging. I think it would be far harder if the team wasn't so skilled and so attuned to the kind of things that we're trying to make. I think everybody has an aspect of this game that they are bringing that piece of themselves and what they want to see in games to the project, and it very much is a collaborative process. Yeah, it's been so much fun. It's been hard, but it's been so much fun.
Oh, that's good to hear. So without wanting to divert us to some sort of super dry technical chat, we are like broadly talking about like game engines and game creation here. So for any tech heads who listen to the show, could you talk about your decision to use Godot for the game? that obviously Godot had a bit of a moment in the sun off the back of the Unity fiasco from like a year or 2 years ago. So it'd be nice to get sort of a spicy like anti-corporate pull quote for the episode. But I think ultimately I'm just curious as to like what are the decisions that go into like deciding on a game engine? What advantages does Godot offer you over like Unity or something else?
I think practically for what was a very scrappy team when we started, knowing that we could use something that was free and open source and not have to worry about a subscription fee or a revenue split with a company down the line was very enticing. I think just to be very practical about it, but also just not going into a project on an engine that felt like it had the baggage of years and years and years of development that wasn't always harmonious with other aspects that were kind of bolted on after the fact. Godot was relatively new when we started, and obviously that meant there were limitations, but we just, I'd just come off of GBG and I had experienced extreme limitations, so everything felt expansive in Godot in comparison. And then, we were very lucky, if that's appropriate to say, that once all of the stuff with Unity happened, there was so much attention on Godot that I think it really ignited the progress and the development behind the Godot engine, and meant that a lot of those features that weren't there when we started were implemented and or were polished and were expanded upon. And we've never really felt like there was anything that was missing from Godot in working with it. And I think it's a really wonderful piece of software.
It's going to be interesting in the next few years to see sort of more games get more attention that use Godot. I feel like it's the sort of thing that in a couple of years there will be like a big breakout game that uses it. To wrap up, kind of start looking ahead. Do you have like a roadmap for Townbox, like and a release date that or any sort of information like that you'd be able to share? What does the road ahead look like for the game?
So we are in the early stages at the moment. We were lucky enough to be showcased in the 2025 Wholesome Direct, and that was such a big moment for us to be able to share the game with so many people. And I'm so grateful that Wholesome Games had confidence in, enough confidence in the project to give it a spot. We've got events coming up where we would like to show off more of the game as well. But right now, the majority of my time on the project is spent working towards securing a publisher. We really do need to find a publisher who can support us for the rest of this journey. It's a big enough game that we need the financial support and we need the experience that a publisher can bring. And right now we're targeting Steam, PC on Steam, and it would be great to be able to bring the game to platforms beyond that. But that again is something that we would need some additional support to make happen. I'd say keep your eyes peeled on the Townbox socials for any more information, but I'm sorry that I can't give like a release date drop or anything at this time.
That is a call to action to any publishers listening. Support this project, get it made. Cool. I guess lastly on that, is there anything you would like to highlight in particular in terms of how people can engage with the project and support it?
Townbox on Blue Sky or on TikTok or on YouTube is where we post any news, any little showcases of what we're working on. We recently passed a big milestone when it came to wish lists on Steam, and that was really amazing to see that there was concrete interest in this project, even though it is very early on. So yeah, I think following those is a big help.
Cool. Yeah, we hear it so often that wish list on Steam, but it does matter. So there's another call to action. Anyone listening, go wish list this game. It helps. Yeah, this has all been great. Thank you so much for sharing all this. I guess, lastly, is there anything else you want to plug?
Nothing to plug.
No.
I think as we were talking about Townbox, I reflected back a little bit on what we've discussed with GBG, and I think the thing that I realized personally is the most wonderful thing about GBG is that thanks to GBG, I've played thousands and thousands and thousands of games on my Switch, and that wouldn't have happened otherwise. To me, like I basically my Switch is a Game Builder Garage platform, and I love the Switch for that. Like it to me is probably the best console I've ever had. And being able to play a fresh batch of games every week and being surprised and delighted by those games is a very, very unique experience. And I think that is a real achievement of Game Builder Garage. And of course, my experience with it is not going to be the experience that everybody necessarily has, but for that reason, it's a very, very, very special game to me.
Dom, thank you so much for joining me today. This has all been really interesting. Thanks for all of your answers. It's been fascinating. Congratulations again on the 4th anniversary. Good luck with the rest of the celebrations, and good luck with Townbox. Everyone else out there, keep an eye on the VideoDojo YouTube channel. There will be a lot more GBG games, I'm sure. Dom, thank you.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been a real pleasure to chat.
Thanks once more to Dom for joining me and his generosity with his time and answers. I thought it was interesting hearing his history with Creative Toolbox games that I'd never even heard of, and how they'd influenced him, as well as his insights into the efforts that go into supporting the GBG community. And those numbers around the GBG shop were pretty crazy as well. There's a big, hidden world in there. A community built around a niche product is not a new concept, but that doesn't make what VideoDojo has achieved any less impressive. VideoDojo and the community around Game Builder Garage that it's played a huge part in fostering is a great example of what can be achieved through conversation and collaboration. There are people for whom these experiences will be their introduction to creating. You like games? Well, people need to make those games. And tools like Game Builder Garage and the community around it are an essential part of the fabric of gaming, inspiring methods of play from the earliest days to now. Thanks for your service, Pod. You may in peace now. Thanks for listening. There's a link to the newsletter for this episode in the show notes, and that includes links to everything we've talked about today, and it's a lot, so I recommend reading it. The artwork for the show was produced by Pixel Benny, and you can find the show online at dialoguetree.cc. Talk to you next time.